Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Special episode for you today. I'm here with I guess, what's your titles? Editors, creators, founders? Which should I use?
John, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Well, I'm John Kelly. I'm the chief editor of the Corner Cabinet, and JB.
Yeah, Jean-Baptiste Bevan. I'm basically the founder.
Okay, so we've got the chief editor and we've got the founder of Corner Cabinet Magazine. And I'm going to show the audience quickly here what we're talking about. This is Corner Cabinet Magazine. I'm very excited about this. This is a new Catholic publication. That's actually the event page. I'll explain that in a sec. Here's Corner Cabinet Magazine. The link for this is in the description area for this podcast. And it's a very unique magazine that I think will appeal to a variety of different Catholic persuasions in the sort of traditionalist milieu, which is kind of the point. We're going to go into the story behind it and what it's about and why you should be interested in this. And before we continue, gents, we need to plug the fact that Corner Cabinet Magazine and the Society of St. Pius X UK District is putting on the London Chesterton Conference on Saturday, 1st June. It is to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the birth of G.K. Chesterton. And I've been told that the conference is being set up well and things are good. I'll be speaking at it, as will Father Sherry and some other speakers. And I told you guys before we came on, I was going to make a fool of myself to try to sell some tickets here. I'm going to read a promo for the conference with a British accent. So is everybody ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, but little background. I used to live in Italy, and when I was in grade 8, so I was 13 and 14, we did have Sky Satellite. So all the English accenting that I've learned is basically from watching like BBC shows over my life. My mom used to watch Coronation Street. So it's, I don't know what that accent is called, but it's the TV one. Okay. So I'm going to pull up the thing here. I'm going to read from a script. I do narrate audiobooks and I do English accents, Irish and all that stuff in them. But it's much different when you're doing it live because you can't press stop and then re-record when you make a mistake. So audience, please pray for me as I do this. Okay, I'm going to pull up this again here, and I'm going to read my script. And there it is in my notes. Here goes. Ladies and gentlemen, Corner Cabinet Magazine and the Society of St. Pius X, UK and Ireland District are hosting a Chesterton Conference to celebrate the 150th birthday of the great English writer. Details for how to attend the event can be found in the description box underneath this podcast. I will be giving a talk on Chesterton's orthodoxy, and I hope to see you there. What do you think, guys?
Kennedy, that was spot on.
Was it?
Yeah, that was pretty damn good. Yeah.
I would say that the first sentence was a little bit wobbly, but after the first sentence, you pretty much mastered it.
Okay,
and I can
good.
see what you mean about it being like the British news anchor's accent.
There you
it's
go.
Quite a neutral, I think. Anybody in the world would understand that as British, even though in Britain we have countless different accents.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that was the British TV guy accent. Now, do you want me to do Father Sherry's accent here? His sort of regal Irishness. All right, I'm going to pull that up as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, though, because here we go. So I'm going to read from my script here. See if this sounds like Father Sherry. Now, we did have Father Sherry here as our prior for years. He was our district superior prior. He spent time in my house with my family, so I've kind of got the Father Sherry thing going, so I'm going to do my best. Ladies and gentlemen, Corner Cabinet Magazine and the Society of St. Pius X UK and Ireland District are hosting a Chesterton Conference to celebrate the 150th birthday of the great English writer. Details for how to attend the event can be found in the description box underneath this podcast. I will be giving a talk on Chesterton's book, Orthodoxy, and I hope to see you there. How was that?
That was absolutely brilliant. If I close my eyes, he was there. He was there in the room. That is.
We got to make sure he sees this.
Absolutely.
All right, good. I made a fool of myself. Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm going to make a fool of myself, you got to buy tickets if you're in the UK, or you can hop on a... Do they still have Ryanair in Europe?
Yeah, I believe we do.
As far as I know, they do, yeah.
All right, hop on a £30 or €30 Ryanair flight from pretty much anywhere. Spend a couple days in London. All right.
You won't be making a fool of yourself there, though, Kennedy. That would be very serious.
I will make sure to make a fool of myself during my talk. I'll make sure I do an Father Sherry impression during. You know what? I'm just going to do my whole talk as Father Sherry and see if he notices.
Yeah,
So
they
long
might
as you
think
don't
you're
do
a-
any interjections.
Good. All right, gents. Why don't you guys give us a little background of who you are, and then we'll get into the questions of the magazine. So, how about Jean Baptiste? How about you go first? Who is Jean Baptiste?
Well, where to begin? So I'm from quite a large family of 7 boys, 3 girls. Lucky us. I hear there are bigger families in Canada. I'm pretty sure I met one of 23 kids, which is quite a record. But 10 for the UK is quite a big number. My parents decided to send all of us children to the traditional Catholic schools, the SSPX schools in France. So that's where we were all brought up. My sisters went to the nun schools there, and myself and my brothers to the boys' schools in the north of France. From there, I went back to England to pursue a course in law, and then started my career after my degree in accounting, so sort of the finance world, and then ended up in sales. If you believe it. It's quite a varied background, no consistency whatsoever. But well, this is, and now I help write magazines.
So you have a regular job, but then you do this on the side. Is that the idea?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And John, what about you?
So yeah, John Kelly. I didn't have the luxury of being sent to France when I was young. I've been in the UK vast majority of my life, although I did spend a little bit of time in France in my early 20s. But so I've picked up a bit of French. It's not quite as good as JB's, but there we go. I'm also from a relatively large family. I'm the youngest of 6 children. I'm an old friend of JB's. Since being a friend of his, I've actually been promoted to his brother-in-law.
Oh,
I've married his little sister, just to cement that bond of friendship that I have with JB. Yeah, so I went to university in England, and I'm currently working in programming for an American finance company.
excellent. So both of you, this magazine is a labor of love and your sort of contribution to the Catholic discourse.
It is
Most
a labor
certainly.
of love. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we've got some questions here. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I'll pull this back up on the screen here so everyone can see it. This is Corner Cabinet Magazine. That's the event. That's the Chesterton conference. And I'll make sure the link for that is in the description area for this podcast. And here is the magazine itself. And I want to read a little bit from the about to give a little background. So in your section where it says welcome to Corner Cabinet, to the Corner Cabinet, it's a magazine designed to bring together the finest contemporary Catholic freethinkers and enlighten through their analysis on history, literature, philosophy, and current affairs. Despite the intellectual depression of our modern times, the Corner Cabinet brings to pen and paper a group of thinkers determined to help revive true Catholic thought and open its readers to a wealth of wise opinions in a world suffocated by the internet's conspiracy theories, clickbait scoops, and self-proclaimed experts. I hope I don't qualify as one of those. Founded in England in November 2023 by a group of young Catholic faithful, the Corner Cabinet magazine aims to regroup in a single publication Catholic opinions on current affairs, politics, philosophy, and publish contemporary studies in theology that help understand the full picture of the crisis of our civilization. That's a pretty good introduction. So my first question, because that's a pretty wide-ranging thing. So it's called the Corner Cabinet. What is the significance of calling it the Corner Cabinet?
Yeah. So the corner cabinet itself, as a concept, is basically. I think I've actually got one on my background somewhere. If I tilt that the right way, there it is. You can just about see my own corner cabinet. It's basically an old piece of furniture that sits in the corner of most rooms in the UK. I don't know about Canada. And it holds a lot of treasures. It's usually where you keep your finest crockery or alcohol, which you bring out at very festive occasions. And yes, it's an old piece of furniture, but it's very much significant. And its door is made of glass. It doesn't hide anything. You're never going to get any surprises, and it holds the finest treasures of your household. And that's basically what was the idea behind the name of the corner cabinet itself, which was we had a lot of fun thinking about it when we sort of came up with the idea, which, like all good ideas, probably came from a deep discussion we had at a pub. But I think that's how the Brits stay productive, you know.
By drinking?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you got to stay warm somehow, you know.
Drinking means thinking for the English.
Well, we wouldn't have the Inklings if it wasn't for a pub. So
Indeed.
that's a very important thing. Yeah, my mom has one of those. Have either of you gentlemen ever been to Canada?
I'm
No,
afraid I've never been myself.
Okay, well, we are your
I've been
subjects,
to
by
the
the way.
US, but not Canada.
Okay,
true.
well, the U.S., they whatever they split off. They don't count. But we are technically British subjects. King Charles will be on our money. I think it's being printed now. Finally, they kind of took a while. It probably would have been faster to have him on the money if it wasn't Trudeau, because he's very much an anti-monarchist. Funny enough, though, the other day in the House of Commons, there was a motion to remove sort of the allegiance to the crown and become a republic, and it was actually roundly defeated. And then everyone and three-quarters of the parliamentarians, including like the Marxist lefties, which was strange, they started singing "God Save the King." So I don't know.
Good for them.
Yeah, strange time, but I was happy to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my mom does have one of these, and you're exactly correct. Because in Canada, a lot of this English history is still here, especially with the older generations. As I said, our CBC, it's like our BBC was. When I grew up, they would play all these English dramas and things. So there was kind of that crossover. And my mom does have one of those, and she's Italian, but nonetheless, she's adopted the tradition. And in it, there is the Cointreau, which is nice to put in your coffee. There are some nice crystal glasses and things like that for wine and champagne, and some nice dishes you use twice a year. So you're exactly correct on that. That's really fascinating. Anything to add, John, before we go to the next question?
I would just say you're probably already aware of this, Kennedy, but the editorial of our first edition can actually be read on our About page on our website, written by my wife, JB's sister, and with just as much wit and elegance as JB has just put it. But in writing, you kind of get the same idea of why we've chosen that name and what the point of the corner cabinet is about. So, for anyone who's interested, you can just go to the About section, and if you scroll down there, then
Right here.
exactly, you've got the editorial. Yeah.
Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, check it out. So this leads me to my next question. Oops, I got it here. Yeah. So, free thinker. This is a loaded term because, the atheist types, the French Revolution types, they'd say they're free thinkers. That's not what we mean, obviously. What is a Catholic free thinker? What do you think? What would you say to that, John?
Yeah, so good question. So this is potentially something that found its way to our About page because we thought it would be catchy and catch the eye and, draw attention. But it's interesting you've picked up on it because you're completely right. When we say free thinker, sadly, the definition of freedom and indeed liberal and liberalism, that means very different things for atheists than it does for Catholic. But essentially, in Catholicism, what freedom really means is not just the ability to do what you like, regardless of the morality. What freedom means in Catholicism is the ability to do the good. So, you're free to go to Mass on Sunday, but you're not actually free to murder your neighbor. You're able to, but you're not free to. So, when we talk about freedom in the context of thinking, what we mean by that is thinking in such a way that it's good and is essentially leading us via thought to what is good and what is true.
Okay, that's excellent. Jean Baptiste, anything to add to that? Because I do have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We also had in mind that we don't necessarily want academics. Everybody gets a university education nowadays, and they think it's some sort of qualification. That's what makes you an expert. We think science. We think that science, in the ancient sense, in its actual literal sense, knowledge, wisdom is what qualifies you. And so we just want genuine people who have something to say, something which is sustainable, and people we basically qualify as wanting to push the right thought forward. So yeah, that's just to add on to what John was saying.
I'm going to add to this. Well, the very fact that you're putting on a Chesterton conference, this is a perfect example of a man without quote unquote qualifications to talk about Catholicism.
Exactly.
But it's hard to find a better English writer who ever spoke or wrote about Catholicism. And for those who don't know, Chesterton's background was in the fine arts. And I would also add, I mean, he died, I believe it was 1936. So his education was largely in the latter part of the century prior and the beginning part of the last century. And, I've long thought it would be so strange for an ancient intellectual to come to a modern university and see all these different sections that never speak to each other. You've got the engineering part, and you've got the modern languages part, and you've got the English faculty, and so on and so forth. And none of them have any correspondence, and all of them are experts in fields that are seemingly unrelated to another. But you had this author in Chesterton who, I think his training and his background in fine arts was so providential because he saw the world as a picture. He saw the world as a work of art by the artist, by the creator. And therefore, he was able to put all of those different pieces together with different focal points and give for us a representation of the thing as a whole. And this is completely lost in the modern, very Cartesian, very bifurcated reality that we live in now. So I commend you fellows on saying, listen, this is not an academic journal. This is a place where Catholic thinkers come to play. And I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've been really lucky, finding all sorts of people. When we announced to our sort of close circle that we were writing this magazine, we have all sorts of people sort of come out of the woodworks and, really felt like they had something to say. And people we never really thought would take time to do. Some people with no qualifications whatsoever who haven't got an academic background as well. They're just incredibly well read and passionate about their subject. And, really, really giving us food for thought, which is exactly what we want.
You know,
Yeah.
sorry, go on,
Sorry, I
John.
would just
You go on,
add,
John.
anecdotally, lots of these people, there were suddenly some people who came out of the woodwork, as JB said, we wouldn't have expected. But, I've also felt many times in my own experience with the circles that we mix in, with many of my friends, people I see after Mass, people I see on social occasions, you could have a really fascinating conversation with them. And it's like, this is gold.
Yeah,
I'm lucky to be hearing this at a party or something, or at a wedding, or maybe even at the pub. But it'd be so good if more people could hear this, and because it's not about academic expertise. Every single individual has their own unique experience, and it's not about it being relative. It's about getting to the same universal truths which exist, but from a specific angle that you might not have come across before. And JB and I are both, I'm sure you yourself as well, Kennedy, we're lucky enough to know lots of these people. But so it was a really exciting idea if we could take, that amazing idea you had about literature, or that point that such and such person just made about that piece of art and its historical significance. And if rather than isolate it to just a conversation that we're having, but put it to pen and paper and publish it, because this is something that people over the world could appreciate and profit from.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's funny you mention when you're having conversations in a social setting. I've been trying to organize with my very good buddies, those who have jobs where they can't be canceled. They either work for the society in some way as a teacher or something, or for traditional Catholics. They're not going to get fired for having Catholic opinions. And
Mm.
because we'll sit around, we'll open up a bottle of Maker's Mark or share whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, if everyone could just hear what we're talking about, it'd be the most entertaining 2.5 hour podcast of their life, because there really is something to that natural music of conversation
Yeah.
that can't be put on. It almost has to be spontaneous and kind of out of nowhere.
Absolutely. That was actually one of the main focal ideas that came from that conversation in the pub before this magazine came to fruition. Was basically that we're so fed up with tabloid news and all those sort of very focused on one specific topic without much argumentation. It's there to shock. And yeah, we were just kind of fed up with that. We wanted basically a sphere for discussion. You can pick up this magazine, read it, and go, I actually disagree with that point. I agree with the principles, but I disagree with the sort of conclusions that they're making. And that's basically what a conversation is. It's that, we have common ground, but we don't necessarily need to agree with the conclusions. And when you pick up this magazine, we invite anybody to go, well, yeah, this is good, but disagree, and that's absolutely fine, because that is basically the point of a conversation.
Do you want to show for us the actual copy of it and show us what it looks
Sure.
like?
Yeah.
So how many pages are in there?
I believe there's just over 50 pages. That's
Okay.
an advertisement for the various pilgrimages that are going on in the SSPX, which take up a couple of pages. But yeah, it's just over 50 pages.
That's pretty substantial.
We were
Yeah.
surprised. We had to cut some articles out. We had so much input. We didn't realize how quickly we'd be able to fill it. So we're quite happy with that.
Now, some would say in this world of tech, here we are on a podcast. I'm using an iPhone as a camera and whatever. I mean, this is very techy. Some would say that a print magazine is obsolete. What would you guys say to that?
Well, I mean, it would be very easy to, direct start a whole criticism of social media, of fast information, and all of that. It's a tool that's badly used. I think we all agree on that. But if you want to get fast, useless flash media, then by all means, go waste your time on social media. What the Corner Cabinet is offering is something completely different. It's intellectual, long articles that elevate, that would try to give you food for thought. So if you want to read it, you're going to need a magazine. There's no other way of ingesting this kind of stuff. I mean, we also offer the online edition, but then again, it's like it's there if you need to quote it. But the hard copy is what you want to be able to read, and so that's what gives it its life. Pretty much, it's like a good book.
Yeah. We mentioned just a minute ago, we were talking about that you were talking about having conversations with your friends, and about how valuable that is. And I was thinking that there's two lost arts in our society, which I'll add a third. And two of those lost arts are conversation, and another one is writing. And these are both things which we're trying to restore. But another one is reading. And just because you see a word and you know what that word means, that's not the same thing as reading. And similarly, when you pick up your phone and you read a text, it's not the art of reading. The art of reading is about sitting down and ingesting an idea. And again, you can do that using a screen, and people are more than welcome to. And there are some things which are better read on the screen than on paper, like a text, right? But we see that even today with a lot of literature which is perhaps not so great, print is far from going out of fashion. And there's clearly something in the human instinct, in the human person. We're physical creatures as well as spiritual, and touch is the most immediate sense. We like to hold a book. There's something more intimate about the reading experience when you've got it on a book, and it's your own copy that exists, perhaps in your corner cabinet, if not on your bookcase. But yeah, there's clearly an intrinsic desire to have a physical copy within the human person. And we've found out through our sales as well that this is clearly the case, because we've had very successful first set of sales, which we're very happy about. And there's been a couple of online sales, but the vast majority have been physical copies. So this is clearly something people are still after.
I can attest to that. I've published 3 books. I'm presently writing my 4th, be out November 4th or 11th. I can't remember the date. It's with Sophia. It's on modernism. It's anyway, but I mean, probably if I look into the numbers and stuff from the sales statistics, I bet you it's 85-90% paper copies. The ebook is there.
Not surprising.
I don't like ebooks. I do have a Kindle reader that I've used kind of reluctantly when I can find, a PDF version of a really old book that I just kind of need to read a part of, and I don't want to stare at my computer. But I don't like it. And it's not even like an iPhone. It's almost paper-like. But even that, still, the feeling of it, my hands cramp when I'm trying to hold the little dinky plastic thing. Whereas, you give me a big, thick 400-page tome. I'm reading Father Fahey's whatever the big thick one he did. It's not Kingship of Christ and Organized Naturalism, but something else. But it's the big thick one, and just holding that thing in my hand, it weighs like 3 pounds,
Yeah,
and
that's
it
really cool.
feels smart. It feels like it has wisdom in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're in tune with such a huge proportion of human history when you're holding that huge tome. You're doing something that's been handed down through the ages.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
we all cry when we hear about the burning of the Library of Alexandria. No one cares when an iPhone breaks. So I think that's
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, this is interesting. Wasn't a question I sent you, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. In your description on the website, sort of breaking through the sort of conspiracy theory thing. I've commented on conspiracy theories before, and I know it's a both and kind of term. It's both a insult and also a reality. Um, what do you mean by breaking through the sort of conspiracy theory narrative?
So I think the first thing I'd say about that is, to a great extent, what we're trying to do with the Corner Cabinet is it's a traditional Catholic magazine. And a lot of what we're trying to do, a lot of it we want to be accessible to non-Catholics, albeit maybe of a conservative persuasion. But certainly a lot of what we're trying to do is geared towards stuff that's useful for traditional Catholics. And I think it's fair to say objectively that um, traditional Catholics have an inclination to go towards conspiracy theories. Now, to some extent, I'm going to start summarizing an article that's actually in the Corner Cabinet, which is about conspiracy theories. Um, Now, as humans, we all have a desire to know. That's natural. We feel stable and secure and in control of our environment when we know and understand something. And that's a normal part of human nature, and that's fine. But when you try to know things which are difficult to really know the cause of, for sure, that can cause a disturbance of peace in your soul. So, and then in addition to that, you have to really ask yourself the question of, do I need to know that? What am I doing here on earth? And what's my end? Is, to know God, to love God, to serve God, to be happy with Him in this life and the next. And there are certain things you do need to know for that to happen. Essentially, revelation, and there are certain things about your specific duty of state that you need to know. So, for a specific job you have, there are certain things that are secular and not to do with the faith that you need to know so that you can be a good Catholic. Now, there's also leisure time, and Catholics are free with that time to read and know about what they want. But I think there's definitely a problem with traditional Catholics where they seek knowledge which they don't need to know, and which, when they go too far down that line, will actually cause a disturbance of the peace in their souls.
Mhm.
So, like, one example, which is the context of this one that we've got in the Corner Cabinet, is COVID. So there are things about COVID, and specifically about how it was dealt with, which I think as Catholics, you it's very fair to say were unjust and damaging to the church. If you want to start going behind the motives of individual politicians, and specifically, like, was this thing planned? You can, if you like, if you've got some free time and that interests you, no problem. But you have to be aware that knowing about that, it's not important for you to get to heaven. It's not important for you to be a good Catholic. And it could also be damaging if you start taking it too seriously and getting too attached to that. I've said a lot there. I don't know if there's something you want to pick up specifically, or if JB, you want to add to anything.
Can I jump in before you go, JP? Because I want to piggyback off what he
cool.
said. Yeah, I wrote an article during the COVID time. I mean, yours was not as long as ours. Yours was longer than the States. Ours was 2 years, really.
Mm.
I mean, Australia got all the press. We had the exact same laws as Australia here. I think they got the press because they're in the Southern Hemisphere. So when we were in the winter, they were in the summer. So everything was open because things were kind of open in the summer. And then when we were all in the summer and there was no drama here because everything was relatively speaking open-ish, Australia's in their winter and they got their crazy lockdown. But I remember thinking to myself, where's all this press in Australia, man? We got the same thing here. But I was writing for LifeSite News during a year and a half or so of the COVID stuff, and I read all the like I had to do a lot of background stuff for articles, reading reports, and all this. but I was very cognizant of being in that sphere that there is a temptation to something like Gnosticism. There is a temptation to something like well, it's as if we don't if you don't know every aspect of this unknown thing, then there's something about salvation that you're missing. And it's
Exactly.
very dangerous. And it's all the reason why trads I think can fall into this is because we are kind of living in a conspiracy, in the true sense of, you know, modernist infiltration and all these kinds of things. These things are very real. But when you get into the realm of things aren't certain and aren't to do with the faith, then you really get into the realm of some really strange individuals. And it made me nervous throughout a lot of this that a lot of good-natured, faithful Catholics would almost be more concerned with certain aspects of how a vaccine was made and so forth, which again, from a moral perspective, there's issues there. No one's denying that. But things that just can't be proven. And it created a lot of anxiety for people that there was really no solution for except more and more knowledge. That's my opinion. JP, maybe you want to jump in.
No, not at all. I mean, I'm totally on par with exactly what both of you are saying. Um, yeah, nothing to add on that side. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really good.
Yeah, I just pick up on a couple of things. I completely agree, and I think the word Gnosticism is a very good word to use there. Because yeah, I think some Catholics did feel some pressure to know more about this. But you used the word anxious just now,
Yeah.
and you see that's the right word. That's what can happen. That's the disturbance in the soul that can happen when you feel like you do need to know the answer to this question, but you don't because you can't. But the problem is, as Catholics, St. Paul is very clear: nothing must make you anxious. Um, and so, if you're finding yourself in a spiritual state where which you could actually help by not bothering with this stuff, then there could be a problem there. And something else I thought of, which is relevant, is I saw that you did a video quite recently, I believe, on the 3 days of darkness.
Yeah.
This is a little bit different. It's not a conspiracy theory. This is dealing with a bit of private revelation. Um, but I think this can be you can have similar problems on this kind of thing that you spoke about,
Mhm.
which is taking things which we're not bound to believe to essentially taking them too seriously.
Mhm.
Because you can't compare a private revelation to the dogmas of the faith, and similarly, you can't do so with unobtainable knowledge about the way of the world at the moment. So it's clearly something that you've dealt with already, Kennedy. And yeah, I think your summary was pretty good.
Well, thanks. Well, one of our priests from Switzerland, I was asking him about the 3 days of darkness, and he said when he got to Canada, he said, these people ask me to bless their candles. Okay, fine, we bless candles all the time. We got lots of blessed candles in our house. It's nice, sacramentals, so forth. Lots of good reasons for that. And they say, yeah, Father, for the 3 days of darkness. And he says, what is this? I've never heard of this. Is it a thing in England like it is over here?
I believe it is. I have heard of certain families, having the candles lit because they
Because you
believe
never
this
know.
is something, or families that have, moved to more. But I mean, more hearsay. It's not something I've actually come across quite a lot.
Okay, it's pretty big in
Yeah,
the States.
Wow.
that's
Yeah. That's
interesting.
interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
I think I've only come across people who really take it seriously online. I don't think I've met people in real life who are like, "Oh, have you heard of the 3 days of darkness? What's this about?" But I've never met somebody who's, I don't know, evangelical about it.
Okay.
Well, to bounce off of that, John, it's actually, we realize, very common to find these sort of things online. With the advent of the internet, it's very easy for anybody with a particular opinion to find other people who think the same way, thanks to the internet. Because you can find these forums, these chats, these groups, and all of that, and it's very easy to find them on the internet. So sometimes, I suppose this is another plug for the corner cabinet, is good to take a step back and actually read something physical, get away from the opinions, and actually see, well, what do you think about it yourself? Take a step back.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, this transitions into my next question that I have for you guys. So, on your website, you mentioned that we live in a period of intellectual darkness in the Catholic Church. So, what would you say constitutes a healthy Catholic intellectual sphere? Is it about theology mainly, art, music, poetry, literature, all the above? What would you guys say to that?
It's a really good question. So I'd say the first point is regarding theology. Catholic lay people absolutely have a duty to know their faith, to know their catechism, especially if they're parents, they should be teaching it to their kids. Education starts at the home. The school simply supplements that. So we really need to know our faith and be well formed. Theology is a little bit different insofar as Catholic lay people don't have a duty to be expert theologians. Like, if somebody came up to a Catholic layperson and said, "Can you refute semi-Pelagianism to me based on scripture and tradition?" In my opinion, a Catholic layperson doesn't have an obligation to even know what that term means. Um, but then again, if it were described, they should have enough formation to say, "Oh no, that's wrong," because we need grace to be good, and I know that from my catechism.
Mhm.
So, they need to know the faith. They don't necessarily need to be expert theologians. Having said that, I think a healthy familiarity with theology, especially those who are more intellectually curious and intellectually able, that's obviously a very good way of spending any spare time that you have. Um, because it will help you to know the faith more, and the more you know something, the more you're able to love it. So essentially, it will help you to love the faith more. Um, I would also say that these other things like literature, history, and music and art, I say that they're very important. So, plug the Corner Cabinet again. There is an article in the first edition of the Corner Cabinet on what makes good literature. And I think it's implicit in that article about why it's important to read good literature as well. Um, Please do read it because it's a brilliant article. But I'll basically summarize it without arguing and explaining too much. But the author of this article explains that what makes good literature is that it reflects light on the human condition, um, which I would maybe summarize the state of the human condition as, a violent turmoil between original sin and grace. And a good book will have good characters which shed lights on that. And the more you read these kind of books, the more you understand what it means for you as a human, what it means for you to be a human, and for your neighbor as well. And it helps you to put these things into practice and shed light on it. I'll just mention something about history, then maybe you can say anything. But I think similarly with history, a good understanding of history, it can shed light on the human condition. So, and I think that can actually be quite reassuring. So, for example, we're hearing a lot at the moment about war. Israel Palestine, it's not looking great. Russia Ukraine, I'm sure plenty of others. Even though that is obviously something that's um, anxiety inducing, we have to understand this is nothing new. Sure, it's a different political landscape, but the fact that humans are being reckless like this, it doesn't take too much human history to understand that this is the way humans have always been. So, that's just one little example which could maybe help us to have a thorough understanding of history and how much war has been involved in that. But I think the other thing about history as well, and a good understanding of it, which can help you as a Catholic, is that if you have a really solid understanding of it, you realize how revolutionary Christianity was. It's not
Yeah.
just like another religion that happens to be the true one, and had some good effects on society, like hospitals. It revolutionized everything.
Yeah.
It revolutionizes the way that atheists today think, and they don't know that.
Mhm.
But the more you delve into history before Christianity and history after Christianity, you will really see how revolutionary Christianity was. Um, and that will help you to love your faith more and appreciate it more as well. It can help your faith and your charity.
Yeah, definitely, John. I mean, to sort of, you talked about original sin, and I think you're really touching on the purpose of this. Because we mentioned intellectual darkness. I mean, I think what we're referring to is basically we're living through the deconstruction. It's been going on for over 200 years, and the deconstruction of the Christian world as much as possible. And we see that with the rise of communism, liberalism, etc. It's really deconstructing it. And what the deconstruction of the Christian world means is Also, deconstruction of its morality and its order. Um, and when that happens, original sin sort of takes over, and you move further away from what Aristotle calls the ideal, which is contemplation, being able to contemplate, and things like the arts, music, good literature, all of these sort of things. They elevate us, right? They help us. I think the saying is rise above the savage and closer to God, right? So this is what the man is capable of doing, and it's exactly what man should do: is be instructed, learn. We're not saying that the Corner Cabinet magazine is basically Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics or his Ethics or something. We're not saying that. It's something that will elevate you, will hopefully elevate you, in the same way that when you go to mass and you've been to mass 200 times, and when all of a sudden the Gregorian chant just hits that sweet spot, it does. It's there to elevate you, and also it's the prayer of the church, but that's basically the point. Yeah.
That's excellent. That's absolutely excellent. And the thing you say about history, I wrote a note down here because I wanted to comment on that. One of the big myths of our post-revolutionary, post-modernist, whatever age is that history is an objective science. It is insofar as there are things that happen and things that didn't happen, but it's a story. And everyone who tells any story has a bias, and that doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means their bias is either wrong or right. If I tell a story about Lepanto, and I do like Chesterton did with his Ballad of Lepanto, he's correct in how he presents Lepanto because he understands exactly what was at stake, because he understands the events in light of the spiritual struggle between Islam and Christianity. He understands that it was the forces of Christ against the forces of Antichrist. And it was about the soul of Europe, and it was about the salvation of the civilization that civilized the world for us. So for him to write a ballad about that is exactly the right approach to it. And we've lost this sense of wonder at our history because of all these ridiculous, I'm writing this book on modernism, and I'm basically going through Pascendi paragraph by paragraph and putting it into regular person words. And, what the tactics of the modernists, it's their philosophy is so contradictory, it's so disordered, it's so wrong. It starts with a philosophical presupposition as a rejection of philosophical presuppositions. It's completely contradictory. We can't trust all things in history because they're not rational. It's like, well, that's a statement about what's rational and what's not, which is anyway. It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
So they take away the miraculous, they take away the subjective, et cetera, et cetera. As Catholics, we need to recapture that when we tell the stories of our ancestors, we should tell them the way that they should be presented. Because if we don't do that, we lose the entire meaning and we lose the whole patrimony. So I commend you guys for taking that approach.
Thank you very much.
I believe it was Dom Guéranger who wrote on Jesus Christ, King of History. It's looking at history, so that's just to sort of push on what you were saying there, Kennedy, that seeing history through the light of our Lord is probably the best way to really sort of look at things and
it is
the best way to draw conclusions.
Well, and Father Sherry nabbed the everlasting man topic for the conference. I was hoping he took it before I had a chance to, but that's my favorite book. Actually, funny enough, I've never read the actual paper copy because I found an audiobook of it about 7 years ago. And the fella, who was an old English actor, John Franklin Robbins, he's been dead for at least 20 years. I don't know if he was well known, but he was you could tell he was a classically trained orator. And he read the book, and I had downloaded it when I was on summer vacation when I was a teacher, and I was taking my at the time we had one child, and I wanted to take him for walks, when he was crying and whatever. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be on these long walks. I'm going to just look up a book. And I fell in love with it. And because the recording was so good, I actually listened to it half a dozen times over the last few years. And I've never actually, that's one book where I've never actually read the physical one because I do love audiobooks. I actually think that's one good use of modern technology because really what it is it's recapturing the essence of being read a story, which was a very, very common art in the past. That's one thing I do think has been a good development. Okay, A couple more questions before we wrap up. This is just totally subjective about what it's like for you guys. So, what is it like being a traditional Catholic in England, in your experience?
Again, very interesting question, because I think, you could probably just do a whole podcast on what's it like being a traditional Catholic. But
Hmm.
certainly, if you go from country to country, you're going to have differences. And obviously, the context of that country is important. So, I mean, England's obviously quite unique. Well, every country is unique with its history, but with England, we had the English Reformation, and Catholicism was completely illegal for 100 years. It was only in like the 19th century that it became legal to be a Catholic again. So when Vatican II hit and the Novus Ordo started, there was more of a resilience, I believe, in English Catholics, about having that taken away, because that was the mass that there were martyrs for, and that was the faith, and they'd only just got it back. And so there was, to some extent, there was more of a desire to hang on to that mass. It's definitely not all English Catholics, because Catholicism in England did the same thing that Catholicism did everywhere else. But it was in England that you had the first indoor for the traditional mass, and so, and something that's in stark contrast to other countries is that, as far as I understand it, like if you want a traditional mass in France, it's by and large, it might have changed, gone up and down, but it pretty much had to be with Society of St. Pius X, Society of St. Peter, or the Institute. In England, if you go to London, you'll find plenty of traditional masses just in the diocese. So, there's been some difference in terms of England's history. JP, do you want to say, maybe touch upon like the differences between England and France and
Yeah,
being
of
a
course.
Catholic?
Yeah. Growing up in France, I really got to see the differences between England and France. Like there, the Catholic community is it's massive. The churches are filled with thousands of faithful. I mean, I'm sure it's massive in America as well. But in France, for the size of the country, it's pretty impressive. And you really feel like you're part of a real Catholic world, and they've got so many schools with hundreds of pupils. And then you come back to the UK, there's one school, one SSPX school. Um, it's now absolutely thriving, but you could really tell that there was a lot more of mission work to be done. Whereas in France, it was more of a sort of retaining what was slowly being lost, but both thriving in different ways, which is really interesting from the perspective of someone who's brought up in another country.
Yeah,
The experience of England sounds a little bit similar to what it's like here in Canada, where we definitely have. I
Right.
mean, Quebec is basically completely apostatized. It's a disaster. But outside of Quebec, we don't have this ages long, ubiquitous Catholic tradition in history, but there is a presence of Catholicism throughout all of Canadian history. So it's not widespread, but at the same time, there are these historical pockets that are kind of strong. And so it's kind of a mixed bag. I will show, though, you mentioned the martyrs. I always tell everyone to get this book by about Saint Edmund Campion. This book is one of those books that you walk away from and you've changed. It's just you can't not change, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book written by Evelyn Waugh, a great piece of English literature, and the great history
Yeah,
of a saint who did die for the mass that we want to retain today. And I always
absolutely.
say to people, well, he didn't die for the mass; he died for the faith. No, 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 he died for the mass, and it was that mass that was worth dying for. It wasn't the Novus Ordo. That's just what the facts tell us. So that's Michael Davies, obviously, huge example of
yeah,
that
of
spirit
course.
of one thing I think that's fascinating about the English experience is you do as a nation, at least from what I can tell, you do have a sense of history. Obviously, um, Protestantism is false, but even in the Protestant monarchy and that sort of tradition,
Mm.
there is this, at least as far as I can tell from the outside, this belief that there was something good about those who came before us, and we should honor that as part of at least national tradition. So does that kind of play into maybe why English Catholics were kind of zealous to withstand against the changes and keep the traditional mass?
Yeah, the love of tradition was definitely something that they tried to upkeep as much as possible. I mean, when the changes were incoming, it was mostly authors and the high intellectuals, the Oxford grads, most of them weren't even Catholics, but they were just sad to see the Latin go because they were so Hellenistic. They were Latinists. They were people who loved what was ancient, what was sort of dripping in tradition. They really wanted to upkeep that as much as possible. And yeah, you are absolutely right as well. Like, cathedrals in this country are incredibly well upkept. The 10th century. I did a tour of the cathedrals of East Anglia with my brother, Father Bevan, and it was just incredible how well looked after. Yes, they're Anglicans, but they really try to uphold these traditions. Whereas I remember from France, the cathedrals that belong to the diocese are practically abandoned and falling apart. They can't raise enough to fix the roofs. It's really sad because they're losing something which, feel like Catholicism held it all together. Whereas in England, with Anglicanism, we have managed to keep it.
Interesting. Well, we owe. I mean, we owe the Anglican British Crown for the spread of Catholicism in places like India and Pakistan, largely, ironically, because the British subjects who were Irish and were sent there had a right to their churches and so forth. So it's kind of a fascinating history. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Kennedy, I'm just going to jump in with one last thing about being a traditional Catholic.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I do just want to say that JB and I we attend the same mass on Sundays. Yeah, I mean, as we were saying, I think it's objective to say that traditional Catholicism got off to a slow start in the UK, despite what I was saying earlier about it being relatively more free to offer the traditional mass in the UK. But specifically the Society of St. Pius X, I think it's fair to say that it took a bit slower to get going, much more so than in France. But we do go to this parish in about an hour west of London, in a county called Hampshire, called St. Michael's, and it is thriving.
Yeah.
We've just had a new church built, and I believe it's correct to say that this is the first church that's been built in the UK since Vatican II, purely for the traditional mass. So obviously there's been other churches that have been built, but one that's purely for the traditional mass. This is the first since the Second Vatican Council. And there are a huge number of young people there. JB, what was that anecdote that you had about one of the priests at St. Michael's?
So one of the priests at St. Michael's, I was asking him about various liturgies, and he said, in the 7 years I've been here, I've never done a funeral, never. He's done multiple weddings, countless christening, baptism, but funeral, never. So it shows testament to the youth and yeah.
That's
interesting. It's a great place to be.
So is that where when I come at the end of and that weekend, is that where we'll go to mass on Sunday, St. Michael's?
Probably not. You're probably going to London.
Okay, that's not close to there.
Yeah, you're welcome to visit St. Michael's during the week, though, if you'd like to. I'm sure you'd be welcome.
All right. So speaking of my visit, which I'm really excited about, I wish I could spend more time. I'm leaving my wife with our 6 kids. Our oldest is 8, so the house is a little bit chaotic. And then I'm actually going to be speaking in Ireland, August, the last weekend of August. So I'm leaving her twice this summer. So I can't stay more than a couple days for leisure, really. But while I'm there, I want to know if this is true. So I've heard that there's warm beer in the UK. I refuse to believe it. Is this actually true? Because if that's the case, then we're going to have to stick to whiskey while I'm there.
Well,
I don't know where to start.
Kennedy. Ale. I mean, where do I begin? Ale is ancient.
So can we just start there, Jimmy? That what we mean by warm beer, it's called ale. It's a real thing. Yes. It's not just that we get lager and boil it in the kettle or something. It's called ale. It's got a thing. Carry on, David.
So, I believe it's made with barley, and this is even it's said that the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians used to make.
So ale. You're saying you drink pagan drinks?
Well, it was very quickly Christianized, as you can tell, which is why we still drink it in this country. But it's a popular beverage in the UK for sure, and it's existed. I mean, long before the introduction of lager, which arrived sort of Middle Ages in Eastern Europe, or sort of like Germany.
What you have to
Um,
understand, Kennedy, is that ale is to beer basically traditionalism, whereas
Okay.
lager is modernism.
yeah, that's how we see it, which is why we don't touch lager. No, we
Okay.
love lager.
Yeah, we drink both very happily here.
But is it warm?
It's
It's not,
not.
well,
It's like, what temperature is it? It's like room temperature.
So it's
yeah,
so it's like okay, is it at least like this where let's say you have a an extra bottle of olive oil or something like that in the cold cellar. Is it kind of like that? So it's not warm, but it's not refrigerated.
that's right. It's not
Yeah.
refrigerated. Yeah. But you
Yeah.
don't really want it that cold because don't forget we live in a country where it doesn't get very warm.
Hmm.
And you go for a freezing cold walk in the countryside. The end of your nose is basically numb, your ears have fallen off. And you walk into this 17th century, even older building,
Hmm.
the roof's sitting very low, and you go up to the bum and you say, "Give us a pint of ale." And they pull the tap, and there we go, boom. And it's just the most incredible feeling. You sit by the fire. Oof, amazing.
Yeah.
Just unrivaled. We'll, Kennedy, I promise you, when you come to London, we will get you. We'll go for an evening. We'll try every single ale which exists in London. You won't regret it.
Well,
You
I
will be a changed man.
I hope so. I like how you guys tried to sell me on the fact that England was cold and maybe you forgot where I come from, but I'll be the judge
Oh
of,
yes, that's a good point. Maybe that's exactly what you need in Canada.
yeah, we on not on beer but on maple syrup. So we make a joke at our parish when we'll have like pancakes and stuff after whatever an event. And there's maple syrup, which is delicious and it's a little bit expensive, but it's a real artisanal thing. And then there's like the table syrup, which is the looks like it and it's in a plastic bottle. And Father, one of our priests, I asked if I get him some pancakes, and I brought the syrups back and said, "Father, this is tradition and this is Nova Sordo. Which syrup would you like?" So I won't drink the Nova Sordo beer, I promise.
Glad to
It's
hear
fine.
it.
We're quite ecumenical. As we said, we like lager as well.
Okay. All right, gents, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for letting me
Likewise.
make a fool of myself at the beginning and sticking with me. And oh, one more thing. I will make sure, audience, I'm going to show the website one more time because I want to make sure you know exactly where to go. The Chesterton Conference. It is in London in Cavendish Square, which does sound so English. And panelists include writers from the Corner Cabinet and guest speakers, including Father David Sherry and Kennedy Hall. Despite my presence, I imagine it will be a good conference. And come help us celebrate really the archetype of the English Catholic spirit, perhaps with Belloc and some others, in this Chestertonian event. Whether you're a traditional Catholic or not, meaning whether you attend only the TLM, if you are a lover of Chesterton, we can probably get along on 99.9% of things. So it's going to be a special event. And gents, the best place to go is the website for the magazine, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
you go on the website. There should be like a pop up, and you'll find there immediately the Chesterton conference. It shouldn't be that. It should be quite self-explanatory.
Excellent. All right, my friends, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I'm excited to meet you in person in about a month and a half's time,
Looking forward
and
to it.
I look forward to it.
Yeah,
All right.
Kennedy, thank you very much for this evening. Really enjoyed
Thank
talking
you
to
very
you.
much, Andrew.
Yeah, looking forward to giving you a pint of ale.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, this has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless you all.